On chilly October nights, when the wind howls against old windows and jack-o'-lanterns flicker on front porches, families once gathered around the table for something more than candy. Halloween wasn't always just costumes and trick-or-treating, it was about the food that brought people together. Strange, spooky, and sometimes downright silly, these recipes turned ordinary casseroles into dishes of delight and fright. Imagine the 1950s suburban kitchen, where mothers would swap recipes for ghoulishly good casseroles, each dish decorated to thrill little ghosts and goblins. Or the 1980s, when Halloween parties shifted indoors, and casseroles became the star of potluck tables, bubbling, cheesy creations disguised as monster faces, witches' brews, or creepy-crawly surprises. These weren't just meals, they were edible decorations, crafted to make kids squeal with laughter and just a touch of fright before digging in. Tonight, we're opening the vault on forgotten Halloween casseroles, recipes that once haunted kitchen tables but have since slipped into memory. From spiderwebs spun out of sour cream to meatballs wrapped like mummies, every dish told a story, blending comfort food with playful spookiness. So, grab your lantern, keep the lights dim, and get ready for a hauntingly delicious journey into America's Halloween food past. If you love stories that mix nostalgia, history, and the strange ways families once celebrated, you're in the right place. Stick around, because by the end of this list, you might just discover a dish eerie enough to resurrect in your own kitchen this Halloween season. And hey, before we dive into the first frightful recipe, make sure you subscribe. That way, you'll never miss another forgotten piece of America's food history, especially the ones best served after dark. Part 01, Spooky Spider Web Taco Casserole, 300 words. In the heart of mid-century America, Halloween night wasn't complete without a bubbling casserole waiting on the kitchen table. While children dashed through neighborhoods in costumes stitched by hand, parents worked their own magic in the kitchen, crafting dishes designed to delight and spook. One such creation that crawled its way into memory was the Spooky Spider Web Taco Casserole. This dish was more than food, it was theater. A golden bed of seasoned ground beef, beans, and tortilla layers created the foundation. But the real star was its web, a spiral of sour cream piped carefully across the surface, stretching into a chilling spider web pattern. At its center, a black olive or two transformed into spiders, their little legs carved from slices that spread eerily across the web. Children would gather close, daring each other to take the first bite, giggling as they pretended the casserole was alive. For families of the 1970s and 80s, it wasn't just about taste, it was about atmosphere. Halloween was the one night of the year when the kitchen became a stage, and meals carried a touch of mischief. This casserole wasn't a gourmet masterpiece, but it carried something even more important: memory. It made kids shriek with laughter, parents smile knowingly, and neighbors ask for just a little square at parties. Though it has faded from modern recipe books, the Spooky Spider Web Taco Casserole remains a ghost of American kitchens, a reminder of the creativity that once lived in every family meal. So, as you imagine that bubbling dish pulled from the oven, ask yourself, would you dare cut into the spider's web first, or would you wait, letting the eerie silence of the table build the suspense? In the glow of a kitchen lit by pumpkin lanterns and the hum of chatter from excited children, there once appeared a dish that turned ordinary meatballs into little characters of fright and fun, the Mummy Meatball Casserole. It was the kind of recipe that families loved to prepare together, each step feeling more like a game than a chore. A pan would be filled with rich tomato sauce, its steam carrying the scent of garlic and herbs, while plump meatballs sizzled nearby, waiting to be dressed in their eerie disguise. Strips of crescent dough, cut into thin ribbons, were carefully wrapped around each meatball, crisscrossing like ancient bandages. When the tray came out of the oven, the golden strips looked like tiny mummies rising from their tombs, their bodies nestled into the bubbling sauce. And then came the finishing touch, 2 little eyes, often made from melted cheese dots or black olive slices, peeking out from behind the wrappings, staring at whoever dared to look too closely. Children gathered around, squealing with delight, sometimes even arguing over which mummy looked the scariest or the funniest. Parents smiled, knowing that food like this was more than nourishment, it was tradition, imagination, and memory baked together in one pan. In the 1980s, when Halloween parties often moved indoors, the mummy meatball casserole became a playful centerpiece, easy to share and impossible to forget. It carried with it the charm of creativity, proving that even the simplest ingredients could be transformed into something magical. Though time has pushed it into the shadows, the image of those little wrapped figures still lingers, reminding us of the joy families once found in turning the dinner table into part of the Halloween stage. The mummy meatball casserole wasn't just eaten, it was celebrated. There was a time when Halloween suppers carried the same magic as the costumes and decorations, and nothing proved it better than pumpkin mac and cheese. On crisp October evenings, families would gather in kitchens where the scent of baked pasta filled the air, blending the comfort of tradition with the thrill of the season. At its heart, this dish took something familiar, macaroni swimming in melted cheese, and gave it a Halloween twist by folding in the earthy sweetness of pumpkin puree. It turned the sauce a golden orange color, echoing the glow of jack-o'-lanterns flickering on neighborhood porches. For children, it felt like eating the very essence of Halloween itself, as though the pumpkin patch had followed them indoors. Mothers in the 1970s and 1980s often brought this casserole to life for parties or cozy family dinners, adding breadcrumbs across the top for a crisp finish. Some even drew faces with extra cheese slices, shaping smiling or spooky jack-o'-lantern designs before slipping the dish into the oven. When it emerged, bubbling and bright, the table fell quiet for just a moment as everyone admired the festive centerpiece. But soon enough, spoons clattered and laughter filled the room as steaming portions were served onto plates, each bite both creamy and slightly sweet, a flavor that was warm, playful, and unforgettable. Pumpkin mac and cheese wasn't just food, it was comfort disguised as celebration, a reminder that even the humblest casserole could carry the joy of the season. Though today it is rarely remembered, its memory lingers in the kitchens of those who once served it with pride, a dish that transformed ordinary pasta into a glowing symbol of October. It was more than a meal, it was the taste of Halloween itself, wrapped in nostalgia and served with love. On Halloween nights long ago, when families turned their homes into haunted havens, there was one casserole that always caused a mix of laughter and shivers, the creepy-crawly spaghetti bake. Unlike the ordinary pasta dishes served year-round, this one came with a twist designed to make children squirm in delight. A pan of spaghetti, tangled and saucy, was baked with layers of cheese until golden, but the magic came in how it was decorated. Black olives, sliced in halves, became beetles crawling through the noodles, while thin strips of bell pepper or carrots were laid across the top like wriggling worms. Some parents even tucked sausage pieces inside the pasta, shaped to look like mysterious critters hiding in the shadows of the dish. For kids, the first glance was always a mix of disgust and fascination. They would whisper, "Are those bugs?" before giggling and daring each other to take the first forkful. By the second bite, the fear turned to joy, as the flavors of bubbling cheese, tangy tomato sauce, and tender pasta erased every trace of hesitation. Around the dinner table, this playful fright became tradition, transforming an ordinary casserole into a centerpiece of Halloween storytelling. In the 1980s, when Halloween parties in basements and community halls were at their peak, the creepy-crawly spaghetti bake earned its place among the most beloved dishes. It was easy to share, fun to look at, and unforgettable once tasted. Even parents joined in the fun, warning their children to watch out for the bugs with a sly grin as they served generous portions. Today, it remains a rare memory, a dish lost to time, but in its heyday, it proved that Halloween wasn't just about candy, it was about turning dinner into part of the adventure. In the days when Halloween stretched beyond candy bags and costume parades, families often saved their biggest surprise for the dinner table, and one dish that stood out was the Frankenstein tater tot casserole. This was no ordinary casserole. This was a playful creation that turned comfort food into a character straight out of a monster movie marathon. At its base, the dish carried hearty layers of ground beef, mixed vegetables, and creamy soup, all bubbling together beneath a golden crust of perfectly arranged tater tots. But the real magic was in the decoration. Parents, eager to delight their children, would assemble the tots in neat rows, shaping a square face across the top. Black olives became bolts, peas or sliced pickles made eerie eyes, and strips of bell pepper or cheese formed a jagged mouth, giving the casserole the unmistakable grin of Frankenstein's monster. When the casserole came out of the oven, steaming and sizzling, children would squeal with laughter, leaning over the table to see who could spot the face first. Some pretended to be frightened, while others declared proudly that they weren't scared at all, before digging in forkfuls of cheesy potatoes. For parents, it was a chance to bring the magic of Halloween into everyday food, showing that the season wasn't just about tricks or treats, it was about creativity and family togetherness. In the 1970s and 80s, when television screens glowed with late-night monster movies, this casserole fit perfectly into the season's spirit. It turned dinner into an event, blending spooky fun with hearty flavors that filled stomachs and warmed hearts. Though it has faded from recipe books, the Frankenstein tater tot casserole remains a reminder of how imagination once ruled American kitchens, proving that even monsters could taste delicious when served on a plate. On Halloween nights when the air carried the chill of autumn and the streets echoed with the laughter of costumed children, there was one dish that felt like it belonged in the pages of a storybook, the Witch's Cauldron beef stew casserole. Families would gather in warm kitchens while outside, the wind rustled fallen leaves, and inside a casserole bubbled like a potion, filling the house with an aroma that was both comforting and mysterious. At its heart, this dish was a hearty beef stew layered into a casserole dish, thick with tender chunks of beef, carrots, potatoes, and onions, simmered until everything melted together in rich gravy. But what made it truly magical was the presentation. Parents often topped it with golden biscuits or pastry rounds, arranging them like a bubbling cauldron lid, their surfaces brushed with butter to gleam under the kitchen lights. Some even scattered green peas or sliced zucchini across the top, adding a touch of eerie ingredients that children imagined had been plucked straight from a witch's garden. When the casserole emerged from the oven, steaming like a spell just cast, children leaned in wide-eyed, whispering that it looked like something a witch might serve from her black cauldron on a stormy night. The first spoonful broke through the golden crust, revealing the bubbling stew beneath, and suddenly the fear gave way to delight as hearty flavors filled each plate. In the 1970s and 80s, when Halloween meals became part of the holiday's magic, the Witch's Cauldron beef stew casserole was a dish that combined play with tradition. It wasn't just supper, it was a performance, a story told with food. Though it rarely appears today, its memory lingers like a spell, a reminder of nights when kitchens became cauldrons of imagination. On chilly Halloween evenings, when candlelit pumpkins flickered in windows and the sound of crunching leaves followed every step, families often found comfort in dishes that carried both warmth and wonder. One of those creations was the ghostly chicken Alfredo bake, a casserole that turned a simple pasta dinner into a playful haunting. It began with tender pasta shells smothered in rich Alfredo sauce, layered with shredded chicken and topped generously with mozzarella. But what made it special was how it transformed into a scene straight out of Halloween imagination. Before sliding the casserole into the oven, parents would carefully place slices of mozzarella or provolone across the top, shaping them into ghostly forms. Some even added tiny olive slices for eyes, turning melted cheese into little faces peeking out from the bubbling pasta beneath. As the dish baked, the cheese softened and spread, creating wispy, floating shapes that looked like friendly spirits rising from the pan. Children crowded around the oven door, whispering with excitement, and when the bake was finally served, they squealed at the sight of edible ghosts staring back at them. For families in the 1980s, this casserole wasn't just about filling plates, it was about turning dinner into part of the holiday's magic. Halloween was more than candy, it was a chance to play, to laugh, and to create memories in the kitchen. Around the table, parents teased their children with spooky voices, saying the ghosts would vanish only if everyone took a bite. And with every forkful, fear gave way to joy as creamy pasta and tender chicken filled hungry bellies. Though time has nearly erased it from modern cookbooks, the ghostly chicken Alfredo bake remains a spirit of the past, a dish that proved even supper could wear a costume on Halloween night. In the glow of a Halloween night, when children returned home with bags of candy and the sound of laughter echoed down dimly lit streets, some families saved the biggest surprise not for dessert, but for the dinner table. That surprise was Vampire's lasagna, a dish as dramatic as the name suggested. At its core, it was a familiar comfort, layers of pasta, ricotta, mozzarella, and rich tomato sauce, but on Halloween, it was transformed into something that looked like it belonged in Dracula's own castle. Parents prepared it with extra attention, making the sauce darker and richer, almost blood red, sometimes enhanced with roasted peppers or tomato paste to give it an eerie depth. As the casserole baked, the bubbling sauce would seep between the layers, spilling slightly over the edges like crimson streaks. When it was served, families often played along with the theme, joking that each slice had been bitten or that the dish itself had been cursed by a vampire. To add to the fun, some even decorated the top with little fangs made from slivers of cheese or garlic cloves, reminding children of the one thing no vampire could withstand. In the 1970s and 1980s, when Halloween dinners often doubled as playful performances, this lasagna became more than just food, it was part of the story. Around the table, kids would giggle nervously, poking their forks into the layers as though testing if it really bled, before digging in with hungry delight. Each bite combined hearty flavors with just enough spookiness to make the meal unforgettable. Though few remember it today, Vampire's lasagna once showed how imagination could turn an ordinary dish into something hauntingly festive. It wasn't simply eaten, it was experienced, leaving behind a memory as lasting as the glow of a jack-o'-lantern at midnight. On Halloween nights when children whispered ghost stories and jack-o'-lanterns glowed from every porch, there was one dish that could make even the bravest shiver with laughter: the zombie brains cauliflower gratin. At first glance, it looked unsettling, almost too strange to eat, and that was exactly the point. Families wanted their food to match the spirit of the night, and nothing said spooky quite like a bubbling pan of what looked suspiciously like brains. The dish began simply: cauliflower florets steamed until tender, then smothered in a rich, cheesy sauce. But when arranged in a casserole dish, the pale, lumpy surface took on an uncanny resemblance to gray matter. Parents leaned into the theme, sprinkling paprika across the top for a reddish glow, or drizzling streaks of tomato sauce to mimic blood. As it baked, the smell of melted cheese filled the air, but the sight that emerged from the oven made children gasp, giggle, and sometimes recoil before daring to take a bite. Around the table, playful conversations always followed. Parents teased their kids, saying, "Careful, that's zombie brains," while children squealed, covering their eyes before peeking again. Once served, however, every forkful revealed creamy, savory goodness beneath the spooky surface. The fear gave way to delight, and soon laughter and chatter filled the room. In the 1970s and 80s, when Halloween meals became more theatrical, the zombie brains cauliflower gratin fit perfectly. It was inexpensive, simple, and yet so memorable that families still recalled the way it made ordinary vegetables unforgettable. It wasn't just a side dish, it was a prank, a performance, and a piece of Halloween storytelling baked right into the meal. Though it has nearly vanished today, its legacy lingers like a ghostly echo of dinners past, where even vegetables wore costumes of fright. And so, as the jack-o'-lanterns flicker low and the night draws to an end, we've wandered through a forgotten feast of Halloween casseroles, dishes that were more than food, they were playful performances. From spider webs spun out of sour cream to mummies wrapped in dough, from ghostly cheese shapes to bubbling zombie brains, each recipe carried with it the magic of a holiday where imagination ruled the table. These casseroles weren't just about filling stomachs, they were about creating memories, moments of laughter, surprise, and just enough fright to make the meal unforgettable. In kitchens of the past, parents transformed the simplest ingredients into haunted masterpieces, proving that Halloween was never limited to costumes and candy. It was about gathering together, about turning supper into part of the celebration, and about reminding children that even the ordinary could become extraordinary with a little creativity. Each bubbling pan told a story, each decoration sparked giggles, and each bite brought families closer under the glow of October nights. Today, these recipes linger like ghosts, rarely seen but never fully gone. They live on in the memories of those who grew up with them, and perhaps, in the kitchens of those daring enough to bring them back. Because food, like stories, has a way of carrying the past forward, reminding us that every meal has the power to become a tradition. So as you step away from this haunting culinary journey, ask yourself, will you let these recipes rest in the shadows, or will you resurrect them for a new generation to enjoy? The choice is yours, and the season is waiting. If you loved this walk through forgotten Halloween kitchens, be sure to subscribe. There are many more eerie, nostalgic food stories still waiting to be uncovered, and you won't want to miss what comes next.